In this video, we're going to answer the question, do youth ministry numbers matter? Youth ministry growth, youth ministry attendance, and what does it mean for you and I in 2024? And here's what I know, and the reality is this: whether you believe that numbers matter or not, I was one time asked at a church about helping grow youth ministry that had 8 students in attendance one night, church of several thousand. I say all that to simply say that whether you believe numbers in youth ministry matter or you're focusing more on quality as opposed to quantity, the fact of the matter is that people want answers for why numbers are bad. How do you take a small number and make it proportional to where it should be? Metrics are the way that our brains in America work. And so whether that pressure is there from yourself, maybe you're getting it from a senior pastor, or maybe you're just getting it from parents or small group leaders, to complicate the matter even deeper, Pew Research said that over 57% of people that claim to be Christians, that claim to be churchgoers, not just the general American public, claim to be churchgoers, didn't even attend a worship service in person or online during the course of an entire month. So if more than half of born-again claimed Christians are not attending services, what do? Your numbers are inevitably going to not be where you want them to be, your boss wants them to be, the parents want them to be. What do? We're going to be exploring 3 key findings that I think change the game for us as youth pastors in this video. We're also, I want to share with you one key way that I think we should be rethinking things as youth pastors and youth ministry leaders. And finally, I have a bonus tip that I actually think when you ask it the certain way, it's a bonus question. When you ask it the way I'm going to ask it, it changes, revolutionizes the entire conversation. Welcome to the Hybrid Ministry Show. If you're in youth ministry, or if you're just a church leader, and you're at least overseeing at some level, some capacity, Generation Z, Generation Alpha, it's important because we're talking about youth group attendance, and it's important to understand who we're actually talking about. So Generation Z and Generation Alpha are kind of the 2 generations in play in this conversation. In fact, I have a video linked at the top of the screen. Go ahead and check it out, where we did a deep dive into Generation Alpha and started to explore them. And quite frankly, it's one of the only videos I know that's out there about Generation Alpha. The data is still really new and still really young, because the fact of the matter is that according to explodingtopics.com, link in the description, if you're watching on YouTube, you might be able to see some of these things online. If you're not watching on YouTube, you should definitely check that out. But Gen Alpha is made up of people born between 2010 and 2025. Wait, what? 2025? Yeah, you heard that right. They're not even born yet, okay? And so the fact of the matter is that data actually is in opposition to some other experts, such as Tim Elmore, who, by the way, I have a chart right here on screen. Again, if you're not watching on YouTube, go grab it, or link in the show notes. It's from his book, Generation Z Unfiltered: The 9 Hidden Challenges of Facing the Most Anxious Population of All Time. This chart is absolute gold, but you'll notice that he draws the line for the end of Generation Z at 2018. So we have Exploding Topics at 2010. We have Tim Elmore at 2018. All of that to be said, Elmore's book is a little bit dated. And so I think that more research and just time, we've honed in a little bit and gotten a little bit closer. And so while this chart is gold, you should definitely look at it and inspect it and learn a little bit more. Elmore doesn't talk about Gen Alpha. They're not on his radar yet when he wrote the book. And so according to this chart, Pew Research draws the line for Gen Alpha at 2012. Again, the reason why any of this matters, not to bog you down with dates and things like that, is that if you're a youth pastor or if you're in church leadership, what you need to understand is that the conversation we're having is like, do we take Elmore's date, or do we take Pew Research's date, or do we take Exploding Topics date? Whatever it is, the reason this matters is because this is a difference between, is that kid in kids ministry or is that kid in youth ministry? And if we're talking about youth group numbers and youth group attendance, we need to understand Gen Alpha, but we also need to understand Gen Z. The kicker on this is that Gen Z, really the youngest Gen Z that we have is going to be freshmen, sophomores in high school. And now after that, they're waving on up. They're in college already, and they are entering the workforce. So if you are not a youth pastor, but just like a regular pastor listening, No longer is Gen Z something that the youth pastor needs to try and understand and uncover. This matters for you. This is important for you as a pastor. And so if you've gotten value so far out of this video, I would love to encourage you to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell, because we're actually in the middle of a series right now, the 2024 Youth Ministry Masterclass. This is section number 2 in that class. The rest of them are going to be dropped in the playlist that's linked down below in the description. So if you have not seen every single video, go back and check out video number 1 where we talked about time management. But without any further ado, here, let's dive into the 3 key findings about Generation Z, Generation Alpha, and church attendance in youth ministry moving forward in 2024 and frankly beyond. All right, so the 3 key findings that are really important to understand about Generation Z and Gen Alpha is this a lot of this data pulled from Pew Research articles pulled and included in the description, whether you're in a podcast catcher or on YouTube. If you are not watching on YouTube, you will notice that some charts and graphs and stuff like that are going to show up on screen here. On YouTube, if you're not watching, you're just listening, you can go grab the link in the show notes at hybridministry.xyz, and this is episode 78, so /078. But the first key finding that I want to share with you is that most teens share the same religious affiliation as their parents, meaning this: your attendance as a youth pastor, youth ministry leader, is highly derived from the adult attendance in your church. You've probably heard this before, but that's why it's important that we don't have silos. It's just as important for you as a youth pastor to lean in to what is going on in the rest of your church. You can't neglect it, you can't forsake it, and you can't take on a posture of arrogance that like what you're doing is better than the rest of the church. Even if you low-key think that, the fact of the matter is that your youth ministry attendance is highly, highly tied to your adult attendance. So if your church is growing, odds are your youth ministry is growing. And if your church is struggling, odds are your youth ministry might be struggling. The biggest drop-off that you'll notice in this graph here and in this research from Pew is that the biggest drop-off from parents who attend church to teenagers who attend church happens in mainline denominations, where the highest proportion is in evangelical churches. Key finding number 2, teens are just as likely as their parents to say that they go to services, but when it comes to more personal forms of religious expression, teens actually appear to be less devout and less religious. I have a stat I want to share with you from my own context, my own anecdotal experience. In our church, Cross Creek Church, located in Colleyville, Texas, we have 4 parts to a 4-part discipleship pathway. So we have Explore, which is people who are far from God, looking for God, or maybe seeking God. Connect, and so once they've made a decision, cross the line of faith, connect with Jesus, connect with His church, connect with community. Grow in your faith, get closer to God, learn to walk with God, learn to invest in a few, learn to multiply. And then finally, the 4th one is a multiplier, someone who is not only making disciples, but making disciples who makes disciples. So we're a very Christocentric, disciple-making, Bible-based church. All that to be said, we explained all of that one day on a Sunday morning to our students, and we asked them to self-identify where they would put themselves in the pathway: explore, connect, grow, multiply. We used kind of pulled from one of my favorite books, link in the show notes, Dan Spader's book, 4-Chair Discipling. So we used 4 different chairs to kind of illustrate the sections of the pathway. The explore phase was illustrated by a camping chair because it's really mobile, portable. You can kind of get close to church, then you can pull it back away if that's a decision that you want to make. We talked about how the connect chair is actually like a recliner. People tend to get across that line of faith and then get very fat and happy. The grow chair is one that's the growth phase is one that's marked by suffering and sacrifice. And so we got the hard metal chair, the one that hurts your butt when you sit in it for a little bit too long. And then finally, the multiply phase was illustrated by a couch, because the goal of it is to bring people back onto that couch with you, like go back down through the pipeline, go back down through the process. So we illustrated that when we asked students to self-identify. We had 40.76% of our students say that they were in the connect phase, the recliner phase, but the overwhelming majority said that they were in 45.2% said that they were in the grow phase. So nearly half of our students self-identified as being in the grow phase, where only like 4% said they were in the explore phase and 9.5% said they were actually all the way in the multiply phase. Now, we have identifiers in our church metrics that we say, like, if you've done these 3 or 4 things, then you are in this phase and you've moved on to the next phase. So we can pull that data on our students as well, but like this is just them classifying themselves. I now lead a group of 4 other guys on a Sunday morning in our grow phase, we have like a book that we go through, a curriculum. And we just got done with the first book. There's 3 total. So we just got done with the first book. It's 7 weeks. It's daily reading. I mean, it's a high bar. And every single one of them, at the beginning of this time, they said, yeah, I read the Bible, I pray, like I do all this stuff. And now that we've actually been in it, now that the rubber has sort of met the road at the end of this, all of their sort of like summarization of it was like, man, this was a lot more than I'm used to. And one of the kids said like, back to this, right? Teens are just as like, they may go to service, but they may not practice religious expression. Part of the problem is they've gone to church so much. And so they know what the right answers are and they know what they should be doing. And so even when you ask them, like, how do you grow in your faith? What are you doing to grow in your faith? They would answer with the right answers. Well, I pray, I read the Bible. But they all admitted at the end of it, like, yeah, we said that, but like we weren't really actually doing it, at least not at this level. So that just bears it out in that key finding. Key finding number 3, most teens report attending religious services with either both at 40% or 25% of their parents. Again, meaning your attendance is again highly derived from your adult attendance. Again, in my own context, our own experience, our Wednesday night, we would mostly say that that's classified under the explore classification. So like, let's bring outsiders. And we average somewhere south of like 45 to 40% of our Sunday morning attendance, which is our second step in our pathway, our connect phase. So I would not say that we have more students in connect than in the explore phase. What I would actually say is that Sunday morning is more convenient, and that's when parents and that's when students are also naturally making Sunday morning or just any church attendance a priority. And so that's the reason why I believe that our attendance is a little bit out of balance between Wednesday night and Sunday morning, and that's not a problem to be solved. It's more attention to lean into and be managed, but it really just underscores this point that most teens attend church with either a parent or a single parent, meaning, once again, like I said, your students are attending church either with both parents at 40% or one parent at 25%. Again, as much as we think that our programming is so relevant, captivating, so much better than the rest of the church, the reality is like our success as youth pastors is often tied to the overall success of the church. However, I do think that there is something that matters and that there is something that we need to focus our mindset to shift a little bit on. So let's dive into that into the next section. All right, so the shift that I believe all of us should consider, if 57% of born-again, claimed Christians, self-proclaimed Christians, are not attending church online or in person at least one time per month, I think that you and I should consider finding a way to go hybrid. And I know you said, hey, that last stat, that said they weren't going online or in person. When I say hybrid, I don't just mean streaming your services. That can be an element of it, but I really believe that's a small portion of a good digital strategy. And again, I hear you're like, dude, I don't have time for it. And I get it. It is a lot of work and it's going to require a little bit of time management. Thankfully, linked down below, I have this playlist where the last video I talked about good time management. But a good digital hybrid integrated strategy is more than just putting a camera in the back of the room and letting someone watch what's going on in the room. You're not interested in that, frankly, and neither am I. We want something that's made for the internet, something like this, something that's more relational, something that's more direct to camera, maybe something that's a little bit more interactive, but find a way to make it more hybrid, find a way to make it more integrated. I also hear you on the other side, but church is a family. Church should be about one-on-one relationships. And I agree with that. Full-fledged, 100% church is about relationships. The best, most dynamic experiences I ever have is when I'm rubbing shoulders or sitting knee to knee with somebody. However, I will also make the argument that churches are in the content creation and content production business. Think about it. What do you spend the majority of your time on? Programming, message prep, planning worship services, small group, like all things that are content based. And especially pastors, senior pastors, no offense to you, but Sunday morning services are some of the least relational moments in the entire week in the life cycle of a church. Here's my deal. I'm a youth pastor, so I get in early, I get set up, Sometimes I'm a little bit late because of my setup into church. I walk in, I sit down, I sing some songs, I sit down, I stare at the back of someone's head, I listen to a sermon for 30-something minutes. I get up early because I have stuff to do as a youth pastor to get ready for the student ministry that meets during the last 2 services of our 3-service Sunday morning set. I'm not talking to a single human being in that entire service. But what I could do is I could consume all of that digitally. I could listen to it in my headphones on a run. I could listen to that, honestly, while I'm across the way in the student building, getting things ready, having the Facebook live stream on in my ears while I'm getting things set up. I'm not saying that I should do that. I'm not saying that that's a recommended strategy, but I am saying on the content consumption side, so much of what we're producing content-wise can be done digitally. So as youth pastors, as we're trying to reach Gen Z, as we're trying to reach Gen Alpha, a completely different generation, I wonder if it's worth considering a shift from focusing only on in-person to finding a way to be a little bit more hybrid, which is why I've created this 100% completely free ebook right here on the screen, linked down below in the description. Also, you're going to see that as I bring about this bonus question, this is really the crux of this entire kind of argument. The question is this: are we as youth pastors, are we as youth ministry leaders, are we in the event business, or are we in the disciple making business? And you know what? The fact of the matter is we're actually going to dive even deeper into that question on the screen linked right here. So go ahead and take a look at that. If you're interested in exploring more about my hybrid strategy, that ebook as well as that episode is linked right here on the screen as well. Hey, check you on the other side. Continue to enjoy this free masterclass. And as always, stay hybrid.